What are affirmations according to Neville Goddard? And why did he insist that the words you whisper to yourself in silence can rearrange the very fabric of your world? In this video, you will discover how Neville's affirmations are not about empty repetition, but about embodying a living state of belief, so real that reality itself bends to mirror it. And by the end, you will understand how to use this same creative law to shape your destiny from within. This is where it begins. The moment you realize that every affirmation is a command issued from the throne of imagination to the obedient world of form. This is how it unfolds. Neville taught that your imagination is not a daydream, but the creative power of God expressing through you. This is where truth breaks through. He said that to affirm is to assume, to feel as though what you desire is already yours, and to sustain that inner conviction until it hardens into fact. This is why it matters, because most people live affirming what they fear instead of what they love, unknowingly scripting tragedies with their inner dialogue. This is where illusion fades. Once you become aware of what you are inwardly saying, you begin to see that your outer life is only an echo of your inner conversation. This is the turning point, when you stop trying to make things happen and begin to live as if they already have. This is the revelation. Affirmations are not about trying to convince the universe. They are the universe expressing belief through you. This is where it deepens. Neville said, "You are already that which you seek." And the purpose of affirmation is to awaken to that truth. This is how the law responds. Once you affirm with feeling, unseen forces begin to align circumstances that reflect your assumption. This is where resistance softens, because belief, not effort, is the key that opens the invisible door. This is how faith is tested. You will be tempted to look for proof, but proof only appears after persistence in unseen conviction. This is where patience becomes power, for every seed of affirmation must rest in silence before sprouting into form. This is how you shift identity. You begin to think from the state of the wish fulfilled, not of it. This is where the heart learns trust, when you feel the reality of your desire so vividly that your senses cannot deny it. This is how creation happens. The inner word becomes flesh through the power of sustained assumption. This is where you remember who you are, the operant power, the dreamer behind the dream. This is why Neville called imagination the Christ within, because it redeems every situation through new perception. This is how the story begins. You, awakening to your creative authorship, realizing that every affirmation is a brushstroke on the canvas of your life. And this is where the journey unfolds, in the silent sanctuary of your own mind, where your words become worlds and your belief becomes being itself. Can you imagine discovering that the true power of Neville Goddard's affirmations lies not in the words themselves, but in the state of consciousness from which they are spoken? In this video, you will uncover how the law of assumption transforms ordinary affirmations into living realities. How every assumption you persist in becomes a mirror of your inner conviction, and how to step beyond wishful thinking into deliberate creation through inner certainty. This is where the veil lifts. Neville revealed that your world is not reacting to effort, but to the mood you occupy most consistently. This is how it unfolds. When you affirm from the end, feeling the wish fulfilled, the subconscious accepts it as truth and reshapes the world to match it. This is where belief takes form. The moment you stop affirming to get something and start affirming from being something. This is why Neville called it law, because the universe does not respond to begging, but to identity. This is where illusion fades. You begin to see that the law was never external. It was always the movement of consciousness within you. This is the turning point, realizing that every assumption, no matter how small, contains the seed of its own fulfillment. This is where the unseen becomes visible. As your inner speech aligns with your new self-concept, outer events begin to mirror that change. This is how destiny is rewritten through repetition of feeling, not force of will. This is where the heart learns its language. Emotion becomes the script by which creation is performed. This is how mastery begins, when you recognize that the imagination you once called fantasy is actually the blueprint of your tomorrow. This is where resistance transforms into faith. Each time doubt whispers, you return quietly to your assumption until it feels natural again. This is how persistence reveals its beauty. The law rewards the one who holds the end long enough for life to yield to their vision. This is where Neville's simplicity hides its genius. There is no distance between imagining and experiencing, only belief or disbelief. This is how you bridge that gap. You live in the feeling, not toward it. This is where surrender becomes strength. You allow the assumption to saturate you until every thought supports your chosen reality. This is how affirmation turns into embodiment. Words fade and the state remains, steady, quiet, alive. This is where you understand the mystery. Assume the feeling, and the world must rearrange itself in obedience to your inner decree. This is why Neville said, "The law is impersonal. It answers everyone according to their belief, without judgment." And this is where motion begins, not outside in circumstance, but within, where the silent assumption becomes the living proof of who you have decided to be. Picture for a moment that the true language of creation isn't the words you speak, but the emotions you breathe into them. And that Neville Goddard's greatest revelation was this: feeling, not thought, is the secret doorway between imagination and manifestation. In this video, you will learn why affirmations without feeling remain lifeless, how emotion impresses the subconscious mind, and how to generate the inner sensation of already having what you desire until reality yields to that vibration. This is where the current of power begins. Neville said that feeling is the creative medium through which all ideas are made flesh. This is how it unfolds. Your emotional state determines the tone of your affirmation, and the tone becomes the truth your subconscious accepts. This is where truth becomes tangible. The mind can argue with words, but it cannot resist a feeling deeply believed. This is why it matters. Every time you feel lack, you affirm separation, and every time you feel fulfillment, you declare completion. This is where illusion fades. The outer world is not the cause, but the reflection of your inner emotional atmosphere. This is the turning point. Once you realize that emotion is energy in motion, you begin to shape that energy consciously instead of reacting to it. This is where the magic begins. Neville urged that you feel it real, not as a future hope, but as a present reality breathing inside you. This is how the subconscious listens, not to your logic, but to your emotional conviction. This is where imagination becomes alive, when you saturate your inner scene with sensory richness until it feels undeniable. This is how transformation occurs. The old state dissolves under the weight of a new, consistent feeling. This is where you reclaim authorship. You stop waiting for the world to give you permission to feel happy, wealthy, or loved. This is how you reverse the cause. You generate the feeling first, and the evidence follows like a shadow. This is where faith turns practical. Neville's teaching was never about blind belief, but about emotional ownership of a new identity. This is how you build inner certainty. You repeat the feeling of the wish fulfilled until it becomes the natural climate of your mind. This is where resistance loses power, because nothing can stand against a feeling that feels like truth. This is how you cross the invisible bridge. Each feeling-filled affirmation becomes a step toward a new state of being. This is where the secret is no longer hidden. It was never about saying more, it was always about feeling deeper. This is why Neville whispered, "Feel it real." Because to feel is to create, and to create is to remember that the world is only the echo of what your heart has already decided is true. And this is where you realize that the secret was never far away. It was pulsing quietly within you all along, waiting for you to feel the truth into being. Now consider this. What if every word you speak, every inner whisper you repeat, is meant to come from the end of your desire already fulfilled, not from the anxious middle of wanting? In this video, you will uncover how Neville Goddard's method of speaking from the end turns affirmations into powerful declarations of completion, how living as if it is done erases the gap between desire and manifestation, and how this shift in perspective allows life to obey your inner conviction. This is where the paradigm flips. Neville taught that when you affirm, you must speak not to your dream but from it, embodying the state of already having achieved it. This is how it unfolds. When you say, "I am," you are not describing the present, you are defining the eternal. This is where illusion fades. The outer world stops being a mountain to climb and becomes a mirror reflecting your chosen identity. This is why it matters. Most people affirm as seekers. Neville's students affirm as finders. This is where the inner voice changes tone. No longer pleading but proclaiming, no longer hoping but knowing. This is the turning point, when you realize the phrase, "it is done," isn't poetry, but spiritual law. This is where consciousness reigns supreme. The feeling of completion generates the bridge of incidents that leads effortlessly to physical realization. This is how it deepens. You stop affirming against resistance and start resting in fulfillment. This is where the weight lifts, because the end holds no struggle, only certainty. This is how you realign. The more you speak from completion, the faster the world rearranges to confirm your assumption. This is where your imagination becomes command, when your inner language matches the tone of victory. This is how identity stabilizes. Affirming from the end fuses desire and belief into one unified vibration. This is where the dreamer wakes. The realization dawns that you are not chasing the dream is chasing you. This is how faith grows. The longer you rest in the end, the less you need outer evidence to feel secure. This is where fear dissolves, because you cannot fear what you already are. This is how creation becomes effortless. You no longer try to fix reality. You express from a state where it's already perfect. This is where the world obeys. Circumstances bend to the tone of one who knows it is done. This is why Neville said, "Dare to assume it is true," because the moment you speak from the end, you move from wishing to being. And this is where the transformation completes. You realize that the true affirmation is not repetition of words, but the steady voice of fulfillment echoing through your soul, quietly declaring, "I am already that." Suppose you discover that every private thought, every silent exchange within your mind, is an ongoing affirmation sculpting the texture of your life. In this video, you will uncover how Neville Goddard revealed that your inner conversations are not random chatter but creative decrees, how to transform self-talk into deliberate creation, and how mastering these unseen dialogues grants you quiet control over the outer world. This is where the hidden power reveals itself. Neville said that man is in constant prayer because his inner words never cease. This is how it unfolds. Your self-talk is a stream of affirmations that either confirm your fears or affirm your faith. This is where realization dawns. The life you live is the outpicturing of the stories you tell yourself when no one is listening. This is why it matters, because silence is never empty. It is the stage upon which creation begins. This is where illusion fades. You no longer wonder why things happen. You trace them back to conversations long forgotten. This is the turning point. When you decide to edit your inner dialogue, you change the script of reality itself. This is where awareness becomes your ally. Each time you catch yourself affirming limitation, you rewrite the line with power and grace. This is how the transformation deepens. You begin to talk to yourself as the version of you who already succeeded. This is where belief strengthens, because your subconscious treats every inner conversation as truth, not imagination. This is how faith becomes audible. The tone of your self-talk determines the tone of your life. This is where mastery begins. You realize that controlling speech means controlling destiny. This is how persistence pays. You replace old narratives with new ones until the inner voice of doubt grows silent. This is where the heart learns its rhythm. The more loving your inner speech, the more harmonious your world becomes. This is how creation speaks. When you affirm quietly, "I am," the universe listens as if it were an order. This is where peace settles in, because you no longer argue with reality. You converse it into alignment. This is how miracles unfold. Inner agreement creates outer confirmation. This is where the illusion of powerlessness ends. You are no longer the victim of thought, but the author of meaning. This is why Neville said, "Change your inner talking, and you will change your world." Because speech is creation in motion. And this is where understanding turns to mastery. Your words within become worlds without, and every inner whisper becomes a thread, weaving the tapestry of your imagined life. Envision a world where every time you say, "I am," the universe bends to confirm whatever follows, because those two words carry the full creative authority of your being. In this video, you will uncover why Neville Goddard called "I am" the name of God within man, how every "I am" statement is an affirmation shaping identity, and how to use this sacred power consciously, to rewrite the script of your reality. This is where divinity meets awareness. Neville declared that when you say, "I am," you are declaring the eternal presence that creates all things. This is how it unfolds. Whatever you attach to "I am" becomes your lived experience, for the subconscious takes it as command. This is where truth reveals its weight. Saying, "I am poor," affirms poverty, while "I am abundant" opens the gate to wealth. This is why it matters, because most people use "I am" to describe conditions rather than to define consciousness. This is where illusion fades. You stop identifying with temporary states and remember that you are the formless awareness choosing them. This is the turning point. Once you realize "I am" is the seed, you become careful with the garden of your words. This is where creation becomes conscious. You no longer speak from reaction, but from divine intention. This is how transformation begins. Each deliberate "I am" reprograms your inner reality until it matches your vision. This is where identity stabilizes, because to affirm "I am confident," "I am whole," or "I am free" is to claim the nature of God within. This is how faith takes form. The more you affirm your chosen "I am," the more natural it feels, and nature mirrors what feels natural. This is where resistance melts, because nothing can oppose the conviction of one who knows who they are. This is how the illusion of effort ends. You realize creation is not struggle but self-definition. This is where consciousness becomes law. Whatever you claim as "I am" crystallizes in time and space. This is how you expand awareness. Each "I am" dissolves limitation and replaces it with divine possibility. This is where silence gains meaning. Before the words, there is the knowing "I am," the pure presence behind every affirmation. This is how power becomes gentle. Creation flows effortlessly from the one who affirms truth without force. This is where Neville's wisdom echoes. He said, "Claim it within, and you will express it without." This is why "I am" is sacred. It is the bridge between imagination and manifestation, the whisper through which eternity speaks. And this is where realization dawns, that to say "I am" consciously is to awaken as the very author of existence. For you were never describing life, you were declaring it into being. Think of the moment when you realize that every affirmation you plant is a seed dropped into the most fertile ground imaginable. The subconscious mind, the silent womb of creation itself. In this video, you will discover how Neville Goddard revealed that the subconscious does not judge, compare, or reason. It simply accepts the feeling you give it and gives birth to it in form. And you will learn how to impress it deliberately with belief so that life becomes your mirror instead of your master. This is where mystery takes shape. Neville taught that the subconscious is feminine in nature, always receptive, always ready to receive the imprint of your assumption. This is how it unfolds. Whatever image or emotion you consistently feel as true becomes the blueprint your subconscious brings into physical expression. This is where the invisible becomes visible. The subconscious builds the outer world with the inner pattern it has been given. This is why it matters, because until you take charge of what you impress upon it, you remain a servant to old mental habits. This is where illusion fades. What you call fate is nothing but unconscious creation repeated so often it appears inevitable. This is the turning point. When you choose your affirmations consciously, you become the master sculptor of the unseen clay. This is where faith begins to work quietly. The subconscious moves with infinite intelligence, arranging people and circumstances in perfect harmony with your belief. This is how power hides in simplicity. You do not need to force results. You only need to impress the feeling of completion. This is where your nightly thoughts become sacred. Neville said the state you enter before sleep determines tomorrow's reality. This is how the womb receives. Every repetition of feeling, every inner scene imagined as real, becomes a conception within the creative depths of mind. This is where patience becomes the highest art. You cannot rush birth, you can only nurture what you've sown. This is how you stop doubting. Once you understand the process, you no longer dig up your seeds in fear, but water them in faith. This is where confidence replaces confusion. The more you affirm with emotion, the more natural the outcome feels. This is how the unseen order works. Life must express whatever the subconscious has accepted as fact. This is where surrender becomes strength. You trust that what is planted must bear fruit in its season. This is how the miracle unfolds. You wake one morning to find the world reflecting what you once imagined in silence. This is where the veil lifts. Creation was never outside of you. It was always just stating within. This is why Neville said, "The subconscious is the womb of creation," because it receives your inner word as law. And this is where realization dawns, that every affirmation is conception, every assumption is pregnancy, and every fulfilled desire is simply the birth of what was once believed in secret. Ask yourself what happens when you begin to see imagination not as fantasy, but as the active workshop where your life is crafted, and every scene you dwell upon becomes a living template for reality. In this video, you will discover how Neville Goddard taught that imagination is the true operative power, how your inner visions are more authoritative than external circumstances, and how to employ vivid, sensory-rich mental scenes to make your affirmations irresistible to the subconscious. This is where the journey becomes tangible. Neville insisted that your imagination is not idle thought, but the divine forge where the future takes shape. This is how it unfolds. By mentally experiencing your wish fulfilled in rich, realistic detail, you send a message to your subconscious that cannot be ignored. This is where the secret rests. Imagination impresses the inner mind with certainty that words alone cannot achieve. This is why it matters, because imagining passively or superficially produces nothing, whereas fully embodied imagination generates life. This is where illusion fades. Your outer world is only a reflection of the mental scenes you repeat and feel. This is the turning point when you realize that rehearsal in imagination precedes manifestation in matter. This is how belief becomes visible. Each sensory detail you incorporate strengthens the conviction of the mind that it is real. This is where emotion fuses with vision. Feeling and imagining together create an irresistible magnetic pull on life. This is how persistence is rewarded. The longer you sustain the inner experience, the stronger the response from the subconscious. This is where mastery begins, by imagining not just outcomes, but the behaviors, environments, and interactions of your fulfilled state. This is how alignment occurs. Your inner life synchronizes with the outer world as if orchestrated by unseen hands. This is where doubt loses influence. The imagination is sovereign and cannot be questioned once fully inhabited. This is how time bends. The inner experience precedes, often by days or months, the external evidence of fulfillment. This is where you awaken creative agency. You are no longer a passenger in life, but the author of each scene that unfolds. This is how miracles are engineered. Imagination is the blueprint, and feeling is the engine that drives it into form. This is where the invisible begins to speak. Events, coincidences, and synchronicities confirm what your mind has rehearsed. This is why Neville repeatedly urged, live in the end. Because to imagine fully is to activate the law that turns thought into reality. And this is where understanding solidifies. You realize that your imagination is the true laboratory of life, and every affirmation is only as potent as the scene it is embedded within. Consider the possibility that every affirmation you feel and imagine creates a subtle chain of events, unseen yet perfectly orchestrated, that guides circumstances toward the fulfillment of your desire. In this video, you will discover how Neville Goddard's bridge of incidents works as the natural mechanism by which inner assumptions manifest outwardly, how life arranges coincidences, opportunities, and encounters to confirm your belief, and how to recognize and follow these invisible signposts. This is where the unseen begins to speak. Neville explained that once you assume a state convincingly, life begins to respond in perfect sequence. This is how it unfolds. Small, seemingly random events align like puzzle pieces, each one pushing you closer to your imagined reality. This is where clarity emerges. Nothing in the outer world is accidental. It is all a reflection of the inner assumption. This is why it matters, because recognizing the bridge of incidents prevents you from doubting when the process seems invisible. This is where illusion fades. The delays, obstacles, and coincidences are part of the architecture, not signs of failure. This is the turning point. Once you trust that each minor event is a response to your inner state, patience becomes effortless. This is how subtlety works. Life provides proof not through grand miracles, but through ordinary circumstances, bending to the assumed reality. This is where faith strengthens, knowing that every meeting, message, or opportunity is part of a guided pattern designed to confirm your inner belief. This is how perseverance pays. The longer you remain in the state of your wish fulfilled, the smoother the bridge becomes. This is where imagination fuses with reality. Your inner scene is the blueprint, and incidents are the construction materials. This is how awareness grows. You begin to notice patterns and synchronicities that once seemed invisible. This is where trust deepens, because the law operates quietly and consistently, responding only to what is firmly impressed within. This is how mastery emerges, by observing and following the sequence of events without resistance, knowing each is a messenger of your assumed state. This is where timing reveals its elegance. The bridge does not rush, but it never fails. This is how creation flows naturally. No struggle, no forcing, only alignment between inner conviction and outer response. This is where patience becomes your instrument. Every step is guided by the rhythm of your inner certainty. This is why Neville emphasized inner persistence. Life will always arrange itself according to the state you occupy first. And this is where understanding dawns. You realize that the bridge of incidents is the tangible proof that what is imagined and felt within must inevitably manifest without. Now consider this: the power to reshape your past, to rewrite moments that once caused pain or regret, is not a fantasy but a practical tool Neville Goddard called revision, and it is one of the most transformative applications of affirmation. In this video, you will discover how revisiting and altering memories in imagination can change the emotional weight of the past, how doing so impresses the subconscious with new outcomes, and how this practice creates a smoother path for future manifestations. This is where the past surrenders. Neville taught that nothing is fixed except what you allow to remain unquestioned in memory. This is how it unfolds. By replaying events as you wish they had occurred, you replace the old emotional charge with one that supports your present desire. This is where freedom emerges. You are no longer bound by mistakes, misjudgments, or misunderstandings. You become the author of history itself. This is why it matters, because unresolved memories generate current limitations, and revising them clears the subconscious of obstacles. This is where illusion fades. The past is only as real as the feeling you invest in it now. This is the turning point. When you take control of inner scenes, the outer world begins to reflect that inner clarity. This is how healing begins. Revision aligns memory with imagination, releasing fear and regret that previously dictated outcomes. This is where power is restored. You no longer react to past pain, but rewrite it in service of your future. This is how consistency transforms reality. Repeatedly revising events strengthens the subconscious impression that life unfolds according to your chosen vision. This is where identity shifts. You cease defining yourself by what happened and start defining yourself by what you choose to be. This is how miracles accelerate. The subconscious acts on the latest, most vivid impressions, and revised memories become fertile soil for new creation. This is where understanding deepens. You realize that life is not about what happened, but about what is believed to be true in feeling. This is how control becomes effortless. By revising past interactions, you shape your present reactions and future experiences. This is where perception becomes flexible. The world adjusts not to what is, but to what is impressed upon consciousness. This is how confidence grows. You know that nothing has the power to bind you except the stories you continue to entertain. This is where the invisible law operates. The subconscious receives the revision as reality and produces corresponding events. This is why Neville emphasized imagination as king. The past, present, and future all bend to the creative mind that knows how to revise. And this is where the journey continues. You carry forward not the weight of yesterday, but the certainty of a mind that commands reality through conscious imagination. Can you imagine the difference between genuine faith and the hollow repetition of optimistic words? And why Neville Goddard insisted that only true belief, not forced positivity, moves mountains within your life. In this video, you will discover how to distinguish heartfelt conviction from surface-level hope, how inner certainty impresses the subconscious far beyond empty mantras, and how to cultivate a deep, unwavering faith that transforms thought into tangible reality. This is where discernment awakens. Neville taught that positivity without feeling is powerless, like a spark that never ignites. This is how it unfolds. Faith is a living state, a steady inner knowing that aligns the mind and heart, while forced positivity is merely verbal exercise lacking substance. This is where illusion fades. People often mistake optimism for creation, failing to recognize that the subconscious acts only on what is felt as real. This is the turning point. When you embody the desired state with conviction, life responds naturally, effortlessly, producing proof. This is where resistance dissolves, because true belief cannot be shaken by appearances or circumstance. This is how the inner world commands. The deeper the conviction, the more potent the unseen law becomes. This is where patience reinforces power. Faith sustains the mind in the end state, regardless of immediate evidence. This is how clarity emerges. You no longer chase outcomes, but rest in the certainty of your assumption. This is where the heart finds alignment. The feeling of fulfillment precedes and shapes external events. This is how persistence strengthens reality. The longer you maintain authentic belief, the more the subconscious organizes experience and support. This is where the mind stops struggling. Forced positivity fades under the weight of true faith. This is how miracles accelerate. The law responds to conviction, not empty repetition. This is where identity stabilizes. You begin to live as the fulfilled version of yourself rather than pretending to be. This is how trust becomes natural, when inner knowing replaces the need for constant reassurance. This is where creation becomes effortless. The world mirrors the state you occupy within. This is how Neville's wisdom manifests. You learn that faith is not wishful thinking, but an inner occupation of reality already realized. This is why he emphasized feeling over words, because only what is genuinely felt moves through the subconscious into being. And this is where transformation takes root. You learn to distinguish between mere hope and the quiet, unstoppable force of true faith. Envision a world where nothing bends to fleeting desire. And yet every persistent assumption quietly reshapes reality, because Neville Goddard revealed that the law obeys only what endures in consciousness. In this video, you will discover how unwavering persistence strengthens your affirmations, how repeated, faithful assumption impresses the subconscious until it becomes reality, and how to sustain your inner state even when outer circumstances seem contrary. This is where endurance becomes power. Neville taught that consistency in feeling, thought, and imagination cements the blueprint your subconscious works from. This is how it unfolds. Each time you return to the state of the wish fulfilled, you deepen its imprint on your inner world. This is where illusion fades. Temporary doubt or distraction cannot undo the work of steady inner occupation. This is the turning point, when you realize that success is not in sudden leaps, but in quiet, relentless repetition of inner conviction. This is how faith solidifies. The longer you persist in the end state, the more natural it feels, and reality adjusts accordingly. This is where resistance loses its grip. Persistence becomes a force that reshapes events before your eyes. This is how identity anchors. You are no longer swayed by circumstances. You are the consciousness that creates them. This is where mastery begins. When persistence becomes a daily practice, life responds with subtle alignments that confirm your assumption. This is how the law rewards. The subconscious obeys only what is deeply impressed, and persistent belief is irresistible. This is where patience merges with power. Time works for you when inner conviction remains unshaken. This is how miracles accumulate. The chain of incidents forms seamlessly because your inner state never wavers. This is where clarity grows. You understand that outer struggle is futile, only inward consistency matters. This is how confidence emerges. You trust the process, knowing the unseen is always arranging circumstances in alignment with your assumption. This is where creation becomes effortless. Persistence transforms intention into automatic manifestation. This is how emotional turbulence settles. Steady feeling replaces fleeting highs and lows. This is where the rhythm of life harmonizes with your inner state. Every event eventually reflects your sustained belief. This is why Neville emphasized the quiet, unwavering mind, because persistence is the silent sculptor of reality. And this is where your journey deepens. You realize that the most powerful form of action is the steadfast occupation of the fulfilled state until life bends to your inner command. Picture for a moment that the moments before sleep are not idle or meaningless, but a secret gateway to the subconscious where every thought you entertain is planted as a seed ready to blossom into reality. In this video, you will discover Neville Goddard's method of SATS, state akin to sleep, how to use this threshold between wakefulness and slumber to impress your affirmations deeply, and how this practice allows desire to flow into manifestation with remarkable ease. This is where the magic begins. Neville taught that the mind is most receptive when the critical, reasoning faculty relaxes, allowing feeling to speak directly to the subconscious. This is how it unfolds. By dwelling in the end state vividly and with emotion just before sleep, you plant impressions that the subconscious cannot resist. This is where reality begins to shift. Ordinary events begin to fall into place, guided by the impressions seated in that liminal state. This is why it matters. Most people fall asleep with worries, unintentionally reinforcing lack, whereas deliberate acts affirms abundance and fulfillment. This is where illusion fades. The outer world mirrors the inner climate created while the mind drifts towards slumber. This is the turning point. When you learn to control your final thoughts of the day, you gain command over the unseen forces that shape tomorrow. This is how transformation is accelerated. The subconscious accepts the last impressions as the highest truth. This is where faith becomes effortless. Sleep itself becomes a partner in manifestation rather than a pause in action. This is how inner tension dissolves, because you trust that the unseen law is responding while you rest. This is where imagination and feeling fuse. The dreamlike state amplifies the vividness of your inner scene. This is how persistence meets opportunity. Nightly repetition strengthens belief until it feels as tangible as daylight reality. This is where identity solidifies. You become the person who already possesses what you desire, naturally and without struggle. This is how miracles emerge. The bridge of incidents grows more apparent as life conspires to confirm your inner state. This is where clarity sharpens. Subconscious impressions precede outer proof, yet you remain undisturbed by delay. This is how creation flows effortlessly. The mind and subconscious act as co-creators when gently guided. This is where the invisible law operates quietly. Sleep becomes the crucible for manifestation. This is why Neville emphasized the final thoughts of the day, because they are the last commands the subconscious obeys before physical reality resumes. And this is where understanding dawns. You realize that SATS is not just a technique, but the secret door through which imagination transforms directly into being. Think of the moment when you realize that every outer circumstance is simply the psychological equivalent of your inner state, and that Neville Goddard taught life reflects the mind like a mirror, without judgment or delay. In this video, you will discover how to align your feelings, assumptions, and affirmations with the reality you wish to experience, how to recognize that external events are proof of inner beliefs, and how to deliberately cultivate the mental state that produces the outcomes you desire. This is where insight pierces. The outer world cannot contradict the inner conviction, it only confirms it. This is how it unfolds. Whatever you occupy yourself with emotionally becomes the pattern the subconscious manifests externally. This is where truth becomes visible. Poverty, failure, or lack are never outer forces but the direct echo of inner assumptions. This is why it matters, because understanding the psychological equivalent allows you to change life from the inside out rather than chasing circumstances in vain. This is where illusion fades. The idea that events control you disappears once you grasp that you are the cause of everything experienced. This is the turning point. When you assume the feeling of success, love, or abundance, your outer life rearranges to match that assumption. This is where consistency gains power. The repeated inner state creates an invisible pressure that shapes events and people to conform. This is how faith becomes actionable. Holding the end psychologically produces evidence in the physical world. This is where mastery begins. By living entirely in the state you wish to manifest, all else must bend to it. This is how the bridge of incidents forms. The subconscious engineers sequences of events that validate the inner state. This is where perception sharpens. You start to see patterns of causality previously invisible, revealing the law in motion. This is how identity is reshaped. You no longer identify with outer appearances, but with the inner self that orchestrates them. This is where resistance diminishes. Outer obstacles lose their power when inner certainty dominates. This is how creation accelerates. Psychological alignment ensures events unfold as extensions of thought. This is where imagination and feeling merge. The inner world becomes the blueprint of the outer. This is how trust is cultivated. You observe life bending to inner conviction and know the law is faithful. This is where the invisible becomes undeniable. The psychological state dictates every tangible experience. And this is where understanding crystallizes. You grasp that to change the world, you must first perfect the state within, for everything outside is merely its reflection. Now consider this. The moment you shift from asking for what you want to knowing it is already yours, you step into the full potency of Neville Goddard's teachings, where inner certainty replaces hope and desire with living reality. In this video, you will discover how the state of knowing transforms affirmations from mere requests into powerful declarations, how the subconscious responds only to what is assumed as real, and how embodying this inner knowing removes all struggle from manifestation. This is where the illusion of asking falls away. Neville explained that asking is the language of lack, while knowing is the language of fulfillment. This is how it unfolds. When you speak, imagine, and feel from the perspective of the fulfilled state, the universe arranges to make that state visible. This is where power becomes tangible. The moment you stop seeking and start existing in the reality of your desire, the law responds immediately. This is why it matters, because persistent asking keeps you in a state of want, whereas knowing locks in the inner conviction that commands creation. This is where the turning point occurs. The inner mind no longer debates possibilities. It accepts the imagined state as fact. This is how resistance is overcome. The subconscious cannot refuse a state that is fully inhabited with belief and feeling. This is where confidence takes root. You live without doubt, certain that your assumption will materialize in the outer world. This is how miracles accelerate. The bridge of incidents forms effortlessly because your inner knowing guides every step. This is where identity strengthens. You become the version of yourself who already possesses the desired reality. This is how time bends. The future aligns with the inner state, and what is assumed today unfolds tomorrow. This is where imagination and feeling fuse. The known state radiates conviction that the subconscious must obey. This is how patience transforms. You no longer chase outcomes, but watch life confirm your inner truth. This is where persistence merges with certainty. Knowing sustains the inner state despite appearances. This is how creation becomes effortless. The universe mirrors the consciousness that no longer asks but knows. This is where inner authority reigns. Asking implies dependence, knowing implies command. This is why Neville emphasized living in the end. The state of knowing transforms desire into tangible reality. And this is where understanding deepens. You recognize that the ultimate secret of manifestation is not seeking, but the absolute inner certainty that what is desired is already yours. Envision a world where you carry yourself in every moment as if your desires are already fulfilled. And notice how Neville Goddard taught that this simple yet profound act bridges imagination and reality. In this video, you will discover how living as if transforms affirmations from mental exercises into tangible experiences, how embodying the state of your wish fulfilled rewires the subconscious, and how acting from this assumption accelerates manifestation beyond effort or struggle. This is where the illusion of waiting dissolves. Neville emphasized that the outer world must eventually conform to the state you inhabit internally. This is how it unfolds. By behaving, thinking, and feeling in alignment with the fulfilled desire, you create a consistent inner climate that leaves no room for doubt. This is where truth crystallizes. Life responds to the state of being you occupy more than to any verbal affirmation. This is why it matters, because pretending superficially is ineffective, while genuine assumption shapes events and attracts circumstances naturally. This is where the turning point emerges. Once you consistently live in the end, the law of your inner reality compels outer evidence to appear. This is how persistence becomes invisible power. The subconscious receives the pattern repeatedly until it materializes externally. This is where identity solidifies. You begin to see yourself as the person who already enjoys the desire, not someone chasing it. This is how resistance loses significance. Acting as if removes anxiety and allows the natural law to operate unhindered. This is where imagination and action fuse, the internal state and external behavior harmonize to manifest the assumed reality. This is how faith becomes visible. The world mirrors your inner conviction because you inhabit it fully. This is where patience is effortless. You no longer press against time. You allow the inner state to orchestrate events. This is how miracles flow. The bridge of incidents aligns with the assumption because every action, however small, emanates from a fulfilled state. This is where confidence thrives. You trust that your outer reality is simply catching up with your inner life. This is how energy is conserved. Effort is replaced by inspired movement consistent with the assumed state. This is where creation becomes seamless. The law of assumption responds naturally to the state you live. This is why Neville urged living as if. Because embodiment of the fulfilled state is the direct path to manifestation. And this is where understanding deepens. You realize that to live as if is not pretending, but inhabiting the reality that your imagination has already made real. Ask yourself what happens when you infuse every affirmation with genuine gratitude, and notice how Neville Goddard revealed that gratitude magnifies the creative power of your consciousness, turning simple statements into irresistible commands for the subconscious. In this video, you will discover how feeling grateful for what you imagine as already yours amplifies its manifestation, how gratitude shifts your vibration to one of acceptance and abundance, and how this practice accelerates the alignment between inner belief and outer reality. This is where the heart becomes a magnet. Gratitude is the emotional confirmation that your desires are not distant, but already present in consciousness. This is how it unfolds. By acknowledging, in feeling, that your wish is fulfilled, you send an undeniable signal to the subconscious that it is a fact. This is where illusion fades. Without gratitude, affirmations may feel mechanical, lacking the emotional force to reshape experience. This is why it matters, because gratitude transforms passive wishing into active creation, making the subconscious receptive to every assumption. This is where the turning point emerges. When you combine feeling and acknowledgement, you create a current that pulls events into alignment effortlessly. This is how persistence strengthens. The repeated practice of gratitude saturates your inner state with the evidence of fulfillment. This is where identity stabilizes. You become the person who lives in appreciation, and the world reflects that state of being. This is how resistance diminishes. Gratitude dissolves doubt and opens channels that fear had closed. This is how the law of assumption accelerates. Every grateful thought reinforces the reality it corresponds to. This is where imagination merges with feeling. Seeing your desire and appreciating it in advance makes it impossible for the subconscious to distinguish imagination from reality. This is how faith grows. Gratitude confirms to the inner mind that the desired state is already true. This is where miracles appear. Coincidences, opportunities, and synchronicities emerge as the natural echo of a grateful consciousness. This is where energy flows effortlessly. There is no struggle, only alignment between inner acknowledgement and external manifestation. This is how creation becomes joyful, because expressing gratitude turns desire into celebration rather than longing. This is where understanding deepens. You see that gratitude is the bridge between inner assumption and outer reality. This is why Neville emphasized feeling fulfilled even before evidence, because gratitude is the emotional proof that cements the manifestation. And this is where the journey continues. You realize that a grateful heart is the ultimate amplifier of all affirmations, transforming imagination into life with quiet certainty. Think of the moment when you recognize that doubt and fear are not external obstacles, but internal resistances that weaken the power of your affirmations, and that Neville Goddard taught they can be dissolved through persistent inner assumption. In this video, you will discover how to identify the subtle ways fear undermines your state of being, how to replace doubt with feeling-filled belief, and how to cultivate the unwavering confidence necessary to command the subconscious mind without hesitation. This is where clarity arrives. Doubt is the mind arguing with imagination, while fear is the emotional resistance that delays manifestation. This is how it unfolds. By acknowledging these inner forces without succumbing to them, you reclaim control over the state you occupy. This is where illusion fades. External events have no power to enforce your inner fears unless you allow them to. This is why it matters, because every moment spent in uncertainty weakens the bridge between imagination and reality. This is where the turning point appears. When you persist in the end state despite appearances, doubt gradually loses its grip. This is how resilience grows. Each act of inner faith strengthens the subconscious impression that what is assumed is unchangeable. This is where identity solidifies. You see yourself as the person who remains steadfast, even when outer circumstances fluctuate. This is how mastery deepens. The more you confront and override doubt, the more effortless creation becomes. This is where patience and persistence merge. Fear cannot coexist with sustained, feeling-filled assumption. This is how miracles accelerate. The subconscious acts unimpeded when no internal resistance remains. This is where imagination gains sovereignty. No fearful thought can challenge the state you occupy consistently. This is how inner authority strengthens. You are no longer a servant to chance or circumstance. This is where faith becomes practical. Believing in the end state transforms hesitation into action aligned with desire. This is where emotional power consolidates. The energy previously scattered in worry now fuels manifestation. This is how creation becomes effortless. The mind aligned, the heart confident, the law responds instantly. This is why Neville emphasized persistence in feeling, because the overcoming of doubt and fear is what secures the bridge from imagination to reality. And this is where understanding dawns. You realize that fear only persists when it is entertained, and when dismissed, the affirmations you hold with conviction move through you like unstoppable law. Consider the possibility that every day you wake is an opportunity to inhabit the reality you desire, and that Neville Goddard taught the key to manifestation is to consistently live as if the end state is already achieved. In this video, you will discover how daily practice of assuming the fulfilled state strengthens your subconscious impressions, how to maintain the feeling of completion amidst ordinary life, and how this continuous occupation accelerates alignment between inner conviction and outer evidence. This is where the journey gains momentum. By beginning each day in the imagined end, you set the tone for all experiences that follow. This is how it unfolds. Through deliberate thought, feeling, and behavior, the inner state becomes your dominant reality. This is where illusion fades. Temporary conditions no longer define your life because you anchor in what you desire. This is why it matters, because daily living in the end ensures that every action, decision, and encounter is guided by the fulfilled state. This is where the turning point occurs. When inner consistency overrides outer appearances, manifestation becomes effortless. This is how identity solidifies. You become the person who already possesses your desire, naturally influencing your circumstances. This is where resistance diminishes. Living in the end leaves no room for doubt or fear to interfere. This is how persistence and faith merge. The daily practice reinforces the subconscious impression that your assumption is fact. This is where the bridge of incidents strengthens. Outer events naturally align with the state you inhabit internally. This is how imagination becomes practical. Living in the end transforms mental exercises into lived experience. This is where patience is integrated, because the inner state operates beyond the constraints of time and evidence. This is how confidence flows. The world mirrors the person you already know yourself to be. This is where miracles accumulate. The consistent inner occupation draws opportunities, people, and circumstances effortlessly. This is how creation becomes seamless. Your life manifests what is continually assumed as real. This is where understanding deepens. You realize that manifestation is the byproduct of daily internal discipline, not sporadic effort. This is why Neville emphasized regular inner practice, because the subconscious responds most powerfully to repeated, consistent occupation. And this is where the journey culminates in readiness. You live every day as the fulfilled self, allowing outer reality to catch up with the life you already inhabit within. Envision a moment where every insight, technique, and principle you have learned converges into a seamless practice. And notice how Neville Goddard taught that true mastery of affirmations comes from complete integration of imagination, feeling, and assumption. In this video, you will discover how to unify all aspects of your inner work. Speaking from the end, living as if, revising the past, sats, gratitude, and persistence, into a coherent daily practice. How this integration solidifies the subconscious impression, and how it allows life to mirror your inner reality effortlessly. This is where transformation completes, when every affirmation resonates with conviction and is embodied fully in thought, emotion, and behavior. This is how it unfolds. Mastery is not merely repeating words, but aligning your entire consciousness with the state of fulfillment. This is where illusion fades. The separation between imagination and reality disappears when you occupy the end state consistently. This is why it matters, because mastery ensures that manifestation becomes a natural, automatic expression of your inner state. This is where the turning point occurs. When you act, think, and feel in perfect harmony with your desires, external proof follows as a natural extension. This is how identity stabilizes. You no longer identify with lack or limitation, but as the creator of your experience. This is where fear and doubt dissolve. They cannot exist in the presence of fully integrated, persistent assumption. This is how miracles become habitual. The law of assumption operates consistently, producing effortless evidence aligned with your inner state. This is where imagination and feeling merge into daily life. Every choice and action flows from the fulfilled state. This is how confidence becomes unshakable. The subconscious is fully impressed and acts without delay. This is where persistence and faith synchronize. Repetition is no longer effortful, but an expression of inner alignment. This is how the bridge of incidents expands. External events, people, and opportunities respond fluidly to your integrated state. This is where the inner world rules. The outer world becomes a reflection of complete mental and emotional mastery. This is how creation becomes effortless. The law obeys only what is consistently impressed in the whole being. This is where understanding deepens. You see that mastery is the union of knowledge, feeling, and practice applied without interruption. This is why Neville emphasized full integration, because only when all elements work together does manifestation become inevitable. This is where the journey culminates. You move from learning and experimenting to living as a conscious creator whose affirmations shape reality with precision, grace, and unstoppable power. And this is where mastery is realized. You are no longer a student of imagination, but a sovereign being who lives, breathes, and manifests the fulfilled life continuously, effortlessly, and without limitation.